Welcome to the Inspiring Humans podcast. We are so happy to have you listening. My name is Stephanie Woolard, and this podcast is a platform to showcase the incredible human spirit. On this podcast, I will be interviewing people from all over the world and all walks of life who will be sharing with us their personal dreams and their dreams for the future. I believe that through coming together and creating community, incredible things are possible. In fact, anything is possible. And I hope that this podcast is a launch pad for creating the new world that we want to see, that will have humanity free, thriving, and living in their full self-expression. Today, I'm here on the Inspiring Humans podcast with a friend, David Livingstone, who is such an incredible human being that I admire so much. I think you've had such an interesting career, but your energy is amazing, and your passion for people and learning about different cultures, and you're just an incredible human. So it's an absolute privilege to have you here on the podcast today. Welcome.
Look, thank you so much for having me, Steph. And of course, thank you for starting Inspiring Humans. What a great idea. Just looking at some of the podcasts you've done before and looking at the comments of the people who have signed up for Inspiring Humans, really, they are inspiring. I feel more inspired than inspiring, but I'll try my best during this podcast.
Okay. No, you're absolutely inspiring, and you've had such an epic career, across so many different countries as a foreign diplomat, but so many different roles that, came before that are in so many different fields. So I just find it fascinating. And I'd love to just kind of start by throwing over to you to do an introduction of yourself and maybe a bit of a summary of that, career journey.
Oh, sure. Well, look, thanks very much. It's been a bit of a, as you say, diverse sort of career trajectory. In fact, if I never wanted a career, I've got to tell you, my wife and I worked in all these different jobs when we first met a long time ago. And, at one point I had a business, a toy shop in Williamstown. She'd have been a flight attendant, moved into advertising. And we decided we'd sell our house, sell our business, and just go and study at university and travel and things like that. So we went around the world and traveled. And when we were finishing university, Simone said, "Oh, look, come to a careers day." And I said to her, "But I don't want a career, so I'm not going." And it was absolutely true. I'd had businesses and, basically changed jobs as frequently as the seasons and just really liked it. And so Simone ended up going to this careers day, and she came back and she said, "Oh, just go and sit this test in that, sneaky way that your best friends have in getting you to do things." And so I went and sat this test, and it was for the federal government. And after the test and a couple of interviews, I found myself in Canberra on the graduate program with the Department of Defence. And so this was quite a departure from somebody who thought, "Oh, I'm just going to do honours in Pan-Arabism and learn Arabic and live in the sort of Middle East and things like that." So defence was an introduction to the bureaucracy. And on the graduate program, it was really lucky. We sort of had rotations in different areas, so you could see a bit of the organisation. And when that finished, a fellow came up to me and said, "Come and work for me." And he was starting the defence export area. And he was a really dynamic entrepreneurial go-getter called Adrian Fielding. And so I worked for him for a couple of years, and, he did great things. He nominated me for Navy Staff College, which I got into. And we set up a program for the Middle East, the Gulf states and things like that. But he was so entrepreneurial, he was out of favour in the bureaucracy. And so one day he came to me and he said, his boss and his boss's boss were pushing him out of the organization and he had to leave. And I said, if you leave, I will leave. And if we both leave, we should slap a few people on the way out. And so I went to his boss and said I was leaving the organization because I had no confidence in him or the direction he was taking the branch. So this was really burning bridges, and people were advising me quite sensibly not to do these things. But really, I have such a low tolerance of places of work where you're not happy. If you can't feel that you're really doing a good job, doing the right thing, then it's a good signal it's time to leave. And luckily, I was, I applied for the Department of Foreign Affairs. It's one of the jobs, and I got it. And so I moved to DFAT, which was a very welcome thing. So this was in 1995, so a long time ago. And DFAT offers all of these opportunities. But the most exciting things is you work with incredible people, people who have lived and traveled everywhere, really embrace cultures, and are generally really bright and engaging. One of the beaut things I had, and all of the DFAT policy officers get, is you learn at the feet of really great people who take time to really hone your skills like writing and things like that. So once I was in DFAT, it was really a great adventure of reinventing myself every 2 or 3 years. So you either in a brand new job or in a brand new location, you get weird things like, being in Melbourne on a weekend and getting a phone call saying, could you go to Beirut because we're evacuating Australians because Hezbollah and Israel are having a box on. And, can you go to Baghdad for a short-term mission? These are really great things. But, I served in Africa and Asia and the Middle East. So it was really a great opportunity. And from there, it provided the opportunity to be Chief of Staff for a Federal Parliamentary Secretary for Trade, Kelvin Thompson, who's a great bloke, a really conscientious parliamentarian who worked hard. Then I went to the Business Council as Head of Global Engagement, or Business Council of Australia, so representing the largest companies in Australia, and then worked at the City of Melbourne running their international agenda. So it's been a bit of fun. It's sort of had that nomadic element to it, which I think is, important to me in terms of, this is the life I wanted.
Incredible. Yeah, what an amazing, incredible career where you can meet so many different people and experience so many different cultures and understand, humans across the globe. I think that's totally fascinating.
I think that's right. Look, one of the things about being a diplomat overseas is it's really important to get out of the expat bubble. And what you're saying about, understanding cultures, it's very hard to understand cultures, but, as an outsider, you can get a glimpse if you engage closely with them. Now, one of the best ways that I found to get out of the bubble and engage with ordinary people is just do volunteering. So in Nairobi, I had, a great house with 3 acres of beautiful gardens. And so I had a couple of gardeners and things. And I used to go with them to an orphanage for disabled and AIDS children, or children with AIDS, in a place called Dagoretti in Nairobi. And it was such a desperate place. And we just fixed up the garden, raised money, got new beds and things like that. And my parents, raised all these things back in Australia and sent them over and things like that. It was really, really beautiful. And then in Hong Kong, because I've got a legal background, I volunteered for Helpers for Domestic Helpers, which is a great organisation. It was run by this wonderful woman called Holly Allen, who's a Filipino-Australian. And it provides support and legal advice to domestic helpers who are abused or cheated or, you know, threatened with jail and things like that. And it gives you, you know, such an important understanding of how a glamorous place like Hong Kong works. Now, Hong Kong as a diplomat is just one of the most wonderful, indulgent places you can go. So every night there was like minimum of 2, you know, usually 3 or 4 really fun invitations. And you'd go out and you'd go, I'm going to this reception or party or dinner or something. I'm going to try and get to the others. But it'd be so much fun that you wouldn't get to them all. But it belies the fact that, in fact, Hong Kong runs on people who work for not much. And it's not only true of Filipino and Indonesian helpers. You know, there's a whole working class there that if it weren't for community housing, they wouldn't survive. And there are people, you know, who are senior people and they collect cardboard to make a living. So it was really great to get a good understanding of that aspect of Hong Kong and, you know, going out to the sort of new territories and seeing nurseries in working class areas and things like that. That was good. And in Baghdad was a bit more challenging because breaking out of the expat bubble just includes, you know, a range of security issues. But one of the really great people I met was a fellow called Brad Lauser, who ran wheelchairs for Iraqi kids. Now, this guy is amazing. He was an American contractor, and he saw the need for, you know, helping disabled children in Iraq. And through his connections, he raised all this money and had all these wheelchairs shipped to Iraq that were completely, you could tailor them to each child. So they're fully adjustable. And the American military is remarkable. They used to just fly all these wheelchairs from the US for free. And then the US military would organize, you know, their personnel to go out and distribute it. Now, this was a big undertaking for them because you'd go out of the green zone into the red zone, which was not a US friendly place. And I went with them, and I was the only non-American, only sort of non-military person there. And for me, it was such a privilege because first, you know, working with the American military and just seeing how much these people cared and what they were prepared to do to help Iraqi kids. But then, you know, just meeting the Iraqi families and the kids, it was so moving. It was really, it was just one of the, you know, best things, the best experiences I've had. So, look, you know, it's been fun as a diplomat. There's a real danger that you just get stuck in this glamorous expat bubble and you think you're really relevant to your capital like Canberra or whoever you're working for. But, you know, I think the diplomats I've admired have really made an effort to just get out and work with that local culture and understand, you know, the local people and their lives.
That's super interesting, and you read my mind because I was going to ask you about, you know, all the countries that you've had that role in, but also you know, how do you, when you're moving around so much, how you must have worked out a few quick ways of kind of understanding the you know, the locals and the local community and the culture, because they're also vastly different. And so volunteering is such a smart way to do that, and to, you know, meet people outside the bubble, as you said, because it's not required for diplomats to, you know, to make any of that extra effort. But I suppose you've got that curiosity where you really wanted to understand people and that sort of thing.
Oh, you're right. So look, as I said, in Baghdad, it was more challenging to do that than in other places. But in Baghdad, it seemed to me more important than other places. So in the green zone, you constantly engage with like-mindeds, which are the countries that think like us and have similar interests. So it's the US, Canada, UK. And the danger is you talk to each other from the same perspective and you have the same interests. And so you come to the same conclusions. And so I really, you know, insisted, and I was lucky enough to be in the position to insist and get what I wanted, just going out into the red zone. And I used to host dinners, and, you know, you get exposed to a way of thinking that is often quite alien, and, you know, it doesn't compute with everything you've known. So I was at a lunch with two Iraqis, you know, Western educated, liberal people who are working in human rights in Iraq, a dangerous job. So they're completely admirable. Now they're Sunni, and this is always, you know, an important aspect to somebody's learning and understanding in Iraq. And I was talking with them, and they started saying, of course, you know, the US is in league with Iran. And you know, I said, oh, look, I'm not sure I do know that. Like, you know, it's not what I've come across. And they're going, of course the US is in league with Iran, because the invasion basically gifted control of Iraq to the Shia, to Iran. And I was going, well, you know, the US has a history of tension with Iran. And the husband turned to his wife and said, look, there's no point arguing with David on this or trying to convince him, because he's been exposed to Western propaganda all of his life. And similarly, when talking to some Shia, they were saying that America is in league with Al-Qaeda. And similarly, I said, oh, look, you know, that's not, you know, what I've learned. And America has, you know, seemingly quite a difference with Al-Qaeda. And they say, you know, Al-Qaeda is there to keep Iraq weak. And so this is the American project. Now, this is why I said at the start, it's hard to understand a local culture, but it's really important to just go and listen. And so, you know, with these things, they're perspectives that are deeply held, widely shared in that region, and they're quite counter to what I understand to be real. But when I go to a region, what I always try not to do is to tell people of that region the truth about their region. Like, oh, it's, you know, being a Westerner who goes to a region and tells the locals they don't understand and that we know better is just terrible. And it's fatal, I think, to reporting sensibly back to Canberra, or, you know, whichever capital you're reporting to. But so many people don't get this information. They don't get these perspectives. And if you don't get these perspectives, then you don't have a good feel for the sentiment of the local people. And the sentiment of the local people was clearly quite, driven by a Shia-Sunni competition. So just further on this, I was at a meeting, and in fact, we were meeting with senior people from a political party in the Iraqi government, and they're Iranian-leaning and, powerful, and they have a very strong, social platform. And they started saying, their views, along the lines of, America's at fault and things like that. And one of the people I was with from the embassy started arguing with them, saying, no, that's not right. And, I'm not going to listen to this. And so those people they basically said, oh, okay, look, thanks very much. And the meeting ended and they walked away. And my colleague said, I just wasn't going to put up with that. And I sort of think, yeah, look, I can understand that. But, we're not here to try and convince them. And you're not going to convince them. You're here to listen to what they're saying so you can better understand them. We may not believe what they say. We may not properly, eventually, fully understand them. But we're here to try and listen and get as better sense as we possibly can of how they think and, what drives them. And as I said, it's just a bad look. You go to a region and you tell people, no, you're wrong and I'm right. It's just, doesn't serve any purpose.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I suppose you talked about shifting of worldviews and different perspectives and different cultures. And have you been in, I'm sure you would have been in a lot of situations, but where you've had to kind of develop your gut feeling or follow your intuition or ask questions where things didn't make sense or feel right to you? Because that would be quite an interesting position to be in that role as well, when you've got a mandate, but there might be things that you kind of go, this doesn't seem right.
Yes, look, so in fact, there are some of the best people I've met overseas work for the Red Cross. And I've got to tell you, it's incredibly admirable. It's a great organisation. The heads of the Red Cross offices around the world are often people with really diverse backgrounds, but they're committed and, they have a very clear moral agenda. And I remember meeting the head of the Red Cross in Eritrea, and I was about to go to meetings with the Eritrean government, and the head of the office was saying, oh, so you're going to make representations on, the imprisonment of this gang of 15 ministers that suddenly the president no longer liked, and he locked them all up. I was going, oh, yeah. And this was probably one of the talking points in the meeting that I would have raised. But this fellow really, said it should be a priority because it goes to, not just the governance of the country, but the welfare of the country. So this sort of arbitrary detention of even the most senior people puts at risk everyone. And if no one calls the president to account, if the international community doesn't, then, he just feels even more at liberty to act in this arbitrary way. So they were fantastic. And the other organisation was Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières. They were fantastic. Now, when I was in Nairobi, there was a wonderful person heading up MSF and working on access to essential medicines. Now, in Nairobi, they're saying it's 700 people a week died from AIDS at the time. Now, in the developed world, this was, people suffering from AIDS was, a manageable condition. But in sub-Saharan Africa, it was just killing people because they didn't have access to the medicines that were available in developed world. And she was so brave. She used to make representations to the government, but there were so many vested interests in preventing this message that her house was raided by armed people, and she was bullied and threatened and things like that, and she stayed. And then ultimately she was carjacked with her young child and stuff like that. So I have an intellectual property law background, so I used to provide advice on how countries like Kenya can access essential medicines under international treaties and things like that and stuff. But really, so you feel this strong sense of injustice, and happily there are great people there that are standard bearers for it, and the opportunity to contribute to them and be inspired by them is really a wonderful thing overseas.
I've loved hearing, how Simone, your beautiful wife, has contributed as well on the journey and made those small differences that are kind of in your control, like the people that you hired to, tend to the garden and things like that. Are there, I'm sure there would have been, but in the countries that you've been placed, have there been opportunities to make those differences? Because what you just said about you're exposed to so many injustices in your role, and you're kind of seeing so many different things that you could feel like you want to make a difference there or make a difference there, and that you would be able to in your role potentially by connecting people. Or so where have you kind of gone, okay, let's do something about this because we can and it's in our control?
All right. So look, yes, Simone well, so you won't be surprised to know that, in fact, she's a person with a strong character and a very real sense of justice. Now, in Nairobi, we had 2 guards 24 hours a day. So they would be on 12-hour shifts, and they would rotate. And one of the guards came to work, and he'd been stabbed in the chin and stabbed in the shoulder on his way to work because people tried to steal his bike. And so Simone contacted his company and said, you must pay for this because there's no free medical in Kenya, and it's expensive and people just can't afford it. And his company said, no, we don't cover that. It's on his way to work. Wasn't at work. And so Simone set up this fund to just cover everyone's medical, that if they had a problem, they could just draw on it. So she sent him to the doctor, he got stitched up and things like that. But, from then on, everybody, all the staff knew that there was money and they could just go to the doctor. And it was really beautiful. We had a casual guard come in, and he had this festering wound. And, we hadn't known him before. And someone sent him to the doctor, and the doctor was saying, you're so lucky you came here, and, here's all these antibiotics because you could lose your leg. It's really, it was, yeah. At any rate, and so we had a really good crew at our place, and they were well looked after. But because we had a pretty decent house, there was always maintenance going on. Now, in Kenya, it's quite common that the labourers aren't permanent employees. They're paid a few dollars a day and they congregate at a roundabout, and these contractors drive up with a ute and grab, as many people as they need. And these people come and work for them for the day. And, at the end of the day, it's all over. And, maybe they'll get more work the next day, but they have to go back to the roundabout and things. So there's no commitment from the contractors to these casual employees. And, someone phoned me up one day and she said, the supervisor has these, African employees welding without welding goggles. Now, even if you close your eyes, it's going to burn your eyes. And I said, well, because I used to be a welder years ago. I was going, it's got to stop, And she goes, it already has. I told them that, in fact, the whole work site is shut down until they come back with proper gloves, goggles, and things like that. And she phoned back 10 minutes later and said, look, the supervisor was, deeply unhappy with that, and he phoned a manager and things. So I basically kicked everyone off the property. And can you come and chat to the manager who was at our place? So I drove up, and all these casual employees are lying on the grass outside our gate, and they go, they're resting and sleeping and having a nice old time. And I came in, and the manager was really furious. And basically I said, as far as we're concerned, your standards just don't apply here. For us, this is part of Australia, and we'll, operate according to Australian standards. And, we just won't accept really unsafe behaviours. So that was good. But I think the final thing was, we had a domestic helper in Hong Kong, and she's a fantastic woman. Joined us when she was 27. She had a Bachelor of Agricultural Science from, the Philippines, and she was working as a nanny, a live-in nanny. And we were there for 3 years, and, she looked after our children, became part of the family. And towards the end of it, someone said, look, I've saved all this money and I'm just going to give it to her so she can, go and do something else. I said to her, look, that's a lot of money. That's the sort of money you give to your kids for their education or something. But for, somebody who's not immediate family, you think twice about it. And she said, it's really important to intervene strongly to change somebody's life. If you give them something less, it doesn't change their life. It only makes you feel better about yourself. But really, this woman, Jogi, in 30 years' time would still be working as a domestic helper in Hong Kong. And you can see that, long-term domestic helpers are just worn out. Like they're just, obviously had a hard life. And so I said, well, it's very persuasive. And so Jogi was going to go to to Canada, where they had a good route towards citizenship. And she had an auntie there. And then Canada changed its citizenship procedures. And Jogi came to Australia and studied, a diploma of nursing. Did so well, it became a degree in nursing. And now she's a senior nurse supervising, the entire shift at a nursing home. And she lives in Melbourne. She's a groovy, fun person. And, she sent me an email when soon after she arrived. And she said, she walks down the streets of Melbourne and people smile at her and she feels like an Australian because everyone looks like her. So, the diversity in Melbourne is so great. I was thinking, what a wonderful thing. And now she's, just doing so well. But, it was Simone drove that, and it's great credit to her. Like, she just has this, such a strong sense of justice.
I love that story and that message and someone's way of looking at it, like, give something big to make that shift in their lives, to almost give them a fresh start rather than just, I think that's a really unique way of looking at supporting people, out of one lifestyle into another, or just to kind of, I just think that's a really powerful story when you think about even international aid and the whole, aid sector.
Yeah, look, and in fact, I know Simone just loves what you've done. And this thing of, what she sees in Seven Women is this whole project of helping people reach their potential. And, just the other week she was saying, when you look at the documentary that you've done, and, there's a couple of them now and they're just beautiful, but it's really, you see people who are so disadvantaged that their real human potential may never be realized. But, your interventions not just, provides them with a more comfortable life, but just, provides them, facilitates them achieving their potential, which is so fantastic. It is the best gift. So good on you.
Thanks, David. And I'm really kind of grateful for your support, because we met randomly at, I think, a Nelson Mandela event at Parliament House about maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. And you just have supported me along the way, and invited me to different events and introduced me to different people, and kind of come to the fundraisers that we've had and contributed, and that meant a lot to me. And your friendship means a lot to me as well, because when you're kind of taking the path less traveled and making it up as you go, which is what I've been doing since the start, it's so nice to have people like you that are there, cheering for you and supporting the journey. So it's been unreal to meet you and to have your friendship.
I remember so well the first meeting we had, and you had the red coat on, and just talking to you, one of the things that absolutely struck me was you were doing such a wonderful project, like a project that is incredibly admirable. But what really impressed me was the thing that for the first 6 years, it was touch and go. Now, I've had my businesses, I've seen others in businesses. My sister's got an incredibly successful business now. But for the first 10 years, it was really tough. Like, it was hand to mouth, and you don't know whether it will take off. And the determination and, isolation and loneliness of these times where all the responsibility is on you, and particularly in something where you don't have to do it, but you are doing it. There must have been times where you just doubted yourself, doubted the viability of the project. But to now see it so successful, really, I love the fact that it's so successful. But I am so admiring of the grit you must have shown in the first 6 or 7 years to get that thing together. It's just you know, I don't think people can properly understand when they see something so successful, the testing times that you must have gone through in bringing that about. Because they look at it and they go, wow, you know, people go to my sister's business and it's just flying. And it's such a fun business. And they go, you're so lucky. And she goes, yeah. And I know it's just, you know, it's not luck. It's really, it's so much resolve. And so when I met you, really, I just walked away thinking, God, this young woman has just done the most amazing thing. It's really helping people, but the personal cost to you in, you know, the founding of it must have been great. And, you know, clearly your family's fantastic. They must have been supportive and stuff. But I just walked away admiring you so much for that.
Oh, thanks, David. And I did get a flashback when you talked about, you know, when you kind of don't know what you're creating. And I remember the volunteers, we had more and more people wanting to get involved. And this was before I even knew if it was going to take off or not. And I remember just kind of going, oh my God, like, it's not just me, you know, if it fails, it's just me, and like, sorry about that and feel bad for a few weeks or whatever. It's like this whole team of people now that's behind me and I don't even know where it's heading. Do you know what I mean? So,
and yeah. That's why I spoke of, you know, sort of the isolation, because suddenly all this responsibility is on you. And I know with my sister and her husband, it's like, you know, they've got employees now and, you know, it's just frightening, all this responsibility on you. So, yeah, I can imagine, you know, it's like, I just can't slip away anymore. You know, I just can't fold and go. You know, you got to stay. I think it's just amazing. So, yeah, it'd be fun to hear more of that about, you know, your beginnings.
Thanks, David. But this podcast is actually to capture your story. So back to you. I'm just curious, like I really admire the way you do things very differently as well. You bring a lot of innovation into what you do, and it's probably, you know, as you said, because you've seen so many different ways of doing things and different perceptions and ways of operating and worldviews. And I'm just curious because, you know, you told me about the earring that you've had, which, you know, is not always allowed in different careers that you've had, and you've got this epic ponytail at the moment hairstyle, which I absolutely love. I just think it's so awesome. But also, you know, in the way that you lead people and the way you identify potential and really draw that out in others. And I'm trying to imagine you as a teenager. I'm wondering if you were a rebellious, you know, the rebellious type, or a, you know, more conformist.
Okay, so I'll go to the teenager bit first. Look, I don't think people really change much in life. I think their personalities are stamped pretty early on. And, you know, I think, you know, I wasn't unusual as a teenager. You know, I was moderately polite and reasonably capable and things like that. But, you know, you just given this gift from your parents. Like, it's one of those things that, you know, if your parents give you confidence and they tell you things can be done and they value you, even if you're silly or done the wrong thing and things like that, then it gives you confidence and permission to be silly and do the wrong thing and, you know, finally get it right. So, you know, as a kid and as a teenager, you know, when, you know, I was overseas and my parents came and visited me, and my father said, look, you've done well in a sort of organization and field that he had no contacts in and couldn't help me. So, you know, I've done it all myself. My wife and I sent each other through university and stuff like that. I said, I never feel that I've done it myself. I always feel really grateful for the start that, you know, your parents give you. It's their values, it's their work ethic, and it's their confidence and, you know, acceptance that you can do things, you know, differently. So that's been a really great thing. Now, the ponytail started when I was at the Department of Defence and working at a very conservative area of the Department of Defence. And one of the senior guys around really annoyed me. And so I grew it just really to upset him. And it did. And it was quite satisfying. And anyway, it stayed for a while and stayed on into DFAT and working overseas and things. One of the things that I learned about the ponytail was people would look at me sometimes with real prejudice. And this happened overseas. And I could see it in their eyes, like they would come up and just be so dismissive. And sometimes they would, you know, a few minutes later learn that, in fact, I was Deputy High Commissioner. And they would come back and they would want to be my best friends. And they would be inviting me to their, you know, tourist lodges and things like this. But what I remember is the look they had when we first met. And the thing that struck me about that was you can identify that look of prejudice. But I didn't think so badly about them. What it made me think was, do I ever give that look to others? And so it really made me think, what are my prejudices? And, you know, do I ever give that shocking, you know, judgmental look to others? So I found it really useful in terms like that. And the other thing was, you know, if somebody didn't like me because my ponytail and earring, then I found that incredibly handy because I wouldn't like them anyway. And it meant we never had to cross paths. But look, I suppose when it comes to, you know, doing things differently, one of the key advantages, and I think this goes back to, you know, my upbringing, was the thought that, in fact, I don't have all the answers and I don't need to have all the answers. You know, as a manager or a leader, if you empower others to, you know, share their views and their thoughts and, you know, use their initiative and things like that, it's amazing what people come up with. It's really, really, like, so surprising. It's things I could never think of myself. And as a manager, you have to sort of have this leap of faith that, in fact, people are, you know, really capable. Their potential is enormous. But you have to have the confidence to give them permission to spread their wings and chance their arm, and then provide a safe framework. So, you know, you're not exposing them to risk. You're not sort of chucking them in at the deep end. You're giving them all the tools they need, all the frameworks they need, but you're giving them permission to go and really exercise that inspiration that they all have. And so, you know, at DFAT and City of Melbourne and places, you know, people often, like my peers would come up to me and they go, "You're so lucky you've got, you know, a fantastic team. Like, God, you've got bright people." I go, "Yeah, they're fantastic. They do amazing things." And, you know, it's one of those things, you work as a team and you can just do really, really great stuff.
Incredible. Yeah, I'm sure you've touched the lives of so many people across the globe in your, you know, in your lifetime so far. And yeah, you're such a lover of life. It's just so uplifting to be around you and so much fun. You've got this amazing sense of fun and adventure. So it's a privilege to have you on this podcast and share a bit of your life, but also to, have you in my life as a friend. So is there anything you'd like to share before we end the podcast?
No, look, I just want to reiterate what I said before. Thanks for having me on. But thanks for, starting this web group. And, you are one of the people I really admire. You're one of the people that I look to for inspiration. And I feel so lucky to have you and, Laura and others, my friend Glenn, just around me. And I just go, wow, it's a great life.
Unreal. Thanks, David. Thanks for listening to our Inspiring Humans podcast, and I hope you enjoyed the show. If you have any inspiring human in mind that you would like to nominate, please reach out and let us know. Also, you're very welcome to become part of our Facebook group called Inspiring Humans, where you can connect with incredible people from around the globe. Thirdly, if you are interested in being part of a global network, we have an incredible community at 7continentscouncil.com, where we hold events, programs, and many different initiatives that you can be involved in. Thank you, and see you again soon.